between the drummers, and it goes beyond the United States. You know, that drum is played all over the Caribbean, all over Latin America, all over sub-Saharan Africa. And people all over the world love it and go to study it. When I was in Cuba, there was a contingent of Japanese women who had come to Havana to study the drum. These were Japanese ladies, young women, late high school and early college ages, somewhere between 17 and 25. Yep, they see the real value in that material. So, the culture can be used in many, 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 many ways, and it does have healing potential. There are traditions healing traditions like the so-called medicine dance of the Kung Bushman. That's a healing dance. And then that famous healing song made famous and made popular by Alu Masakila, Bajabula Bonke, the chant of the traditional South African Ngoma or medicine healer. So there are songs, and we know that musical vibrations, vibrations of any kind, have an impact on the body.
Yeah.
Okay, and they have an impact on our psychological state, and that's one of the reasons why during warfare, inside of the tank, certain types of music are played for the soldiers that hypes them up and gets them ready to fight. You know, I think what happened to us and what we're seeing now is the backwash of a massive attack on our community. The murdering off, and it was probably about a 5 to 7 point prong attack. The murdering off of the leadership. And the leaders that couldn't be murdered off could be rendered ineffective through rumor, innuendo, lies, missteps, you know, all of that. And then locking up 2 generations of young black men who otherwise might have stepped into leadership positions had that movement continued. They would have been swept up in that movement. So, and then the massive crack cocaine.
Yes. Okay, you ready to take? I'm going to put all that good stuff on the tape. Trina.
Okie dokie, so I will mention my name. What's my name? So everybody say, can you produce your birth certificate? No, but don't you believe I was born? I have to prove I was born with my birth certificate? That's the craziest thing.
Oh, yes, so start off with your name.
Okay.
And your credentials.
Okay.
You know, professor at Rutgers or whatever you want to say.
Okie dokie, all right. Well, let me know when you're ready for me to be ready.
You ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello. My name is Professor Katrina Hazard Donnell, and I'm a professor in the Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice Department at Rutgers University in Camden, New Jersey. I have a doctorate in social organization and change, and my primary research area is African American culture, particularly dance and folk spiritual belief.
And also, when you're answering the questions, you could look at Dr. Patina also.
Okay, all right.
And why you call yourself professor?
Oh.
You're a doctor.
Okay, I can say doctor.
A professor is anybody that can teach at a university.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, I can say it. Want me to do it again?
Yes.
All right. We can just start at 3.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Dr. Katrina Hazard Donnell, and I am a professor at Rutgers University in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice. I have a PhD in social organization and change, and my primary research area is African American dance and spiritual folk belief.
Okay, Dr. Katrina Hazard. Are you using Donald?
Yeah, Donald's okay.
Dr. Katrina Hazard Donald, would you talk to us about the so-called criminality in our society that deals with the gun violence and while doing that, can you talk about some ways that we can help our community to heal through therapeutic dance or therapeutic arts?
Well, that's a very important and really significant question, and it's a difficult question. If we look at African traditional culture, especially Central Africa, we know that dance has a healing function. The medicine dance of the Kum Bushman, for example. And there are other dances that are tied to healing rituals, healing and chanting rituals. So there's a legacy of movement being used in a healing capacity. In our community, the healing took place in a larger, almost organic community. If a member of the community was troubled, they could always attend a function in which the community embraced them, in which they could express their grief or disappointment or sadness. And so sometimes our dances and our corn shucking festivals all served that function. It gave the individual the absolute feeling that there was a basement beneath them, that there was a structure, a community structure that buttressed them, that they were not alone in the world, that there was always someone that they could fall back on. And to that extent, they could let go of grief much easier. They could let go of sadness. They could let go of unhappiness. But today, we don't have those large community circles that we used to have, and we had them right up until the 1950s. Even some of our large dances would serve those functions for particular communities of people, especially our block parties. Young people would oftentimes gather, form themselves into dance clubs or into associations that were marked by some movement form. And you see this with the fraternity stepping and the sorority and fraternity stepping today. You also saw it with the early marching bands and the Elks, the Masons, the Odd Fellows, all had parades and marching bands, and so they had movement components. And those movement components served a function for our community. They healed our community because they were an arena in which we could triumph. It was an arena in which we did not experience failure and recrimination. And so it had a psychological healing effect on us whenever we danced, because we were so self-satisfied, because it was an area that we knew we were the best at. And it served a number of functions. Today, our community centers are probably in many instances in as much disarray as our schools are. But we can still use dance and the arts especially as a way to keep our young people, or to refocus the energies of our young people. Crime, so-called crime, especially certain types of crimes, are directly related to the economy and are directly related to employment and lack of gainful employment. I talk to so many young people who are under 40, especially young men, who say they don't want to work for the man. And I try to listen to hear why. And they feel a sense of control, that they're making somebody else wealthy, that they cannot control their lives, and what they're working for is not gainful. What do they have for it at the end of the day? And so many of them prefer to work in the alternative economy. We are losing our young people. That's the whole point. More and more of them see less and less of a need to be mainstream, to try to make it according to the rules, which sort of propels them into an underground culture. It's a culture that became permeated with violence after crack cocaine was intentionally pumped into our community with the aid of the federal government. You know, the truth is, been told about this already. And, the whole role of the only person severely punished was Freeway Ricky Ross. Everybody else got rich and got away with it. But this poison was pumped into our communities, and it was followed by large numbers of guns so that the young drug dealers could protect their turf and their territory. Now, this was drastically different than the toll that was taken on us by heroin. Heroin was bad. Heroin was devastating. But heroin did not produce the kind of neurotic violence that you got with the crack cocaine trade. Not the kind of public mass violence of one community member against another. It just didn't happen with heroin in the same way and to the same extent. And so crack cocaine was intentionally pumped into our community, and violence was intentionally stirred up among our young people while we were presenting a form of music that glorified gangsterism. We're producing Hollywood films with large numbers of gunshots. I watched the first episode of John Wick, and we counted, I don't know, maybe the first 45 seconds of the film, we counted 75 gunshots. He shot 75 people in just the first few minutes of the film. That's like 75 human beings caught lead like in the first 5 minutes of the movie. So what are we doing? What kind of culture are we pushing upon our young people? And certain communities are more susceptible to this model of violence than other communities are. Yeah. And so we can use culture, but culture will not solve the problem. There has to be large-scale, health-appropriate intervention. I see this as a national health crisis. The crime that we are experiencing with our young people shooting each other is a national health crisis. It's not merely an act of homicide or an act of suicide or an act of assault. It has reached a national health crisis state. And we have to approach it that way, or we are going to go down. It's going to spread to all segments of the society, and we're seeing it now with this 3 young white people being shot by men from their porch, shooting long distance down into their driveways. Another one shooting young black men who's knocking on the wrong door. You know, we got 4 young people dead now because some crackpot guy decides he wants to just shoot out. So that there's so many models of violence that tell us that that behavior is okay. It's in our films, it's in our TV commercials, it's in our music. What are we doing wrong? And so we're promoting a model of violence, especially once gangster rap came on the scene. It did nothing but further support. And you get a group of young men who have been, to some extent, denied entrance into mainstream society and cannot fulfill themselves, cannot fulfill their ideal of what a man is supposed to be. As to quote James Baldwin, he said, they will burn it to the ground. So we owe ourselves as Americans, we owe ourselves a legacy of health for all of our citizens. You know, when Du Bois wrote Philadelphia Negro, one of the areas that he was very sensitive about was this area of so-called crime. And so one of the things he did was to, rather than compare the so-called Negro crime rate in the United States against white Americans, he looked at the crime rate in all white countries and countries that had no Negro populations. And what he found is that the crime rate in many of those societies was significantly higher than the so-called Negro crime rate in the United States. And he used this methodology to illuminate, to sort of remove people from the prejudicial view that they had in their minds about, quote, Negro criminality. It was a sensitive issue then, and it's a sensitive issue now, because our men have never been able to achieve full employment. We have always been the last hired and the first fired. Our men have always had to struggle to support their families. Our women have long had this legacy of having to pick up day work and additional jobs. And so I'm surprised that the level of criminality is not higher. None of our young people want to die in the streets. And I suspect that none of them want to have to kill anyone in the streets, because that's something you have to live with. Once you do it, you can't take it back. And you live with that until you leave. And so we have to intervene, and we have to intervene with humane programs that include the culture of the community that we are addressing. So if our community is a community that has produced outstanding music, as the African American community has, we can use those things to help support our young people. We have to get them early enough. We have to also support young parents. Yeah, we don't support the young parents. We don't support the young kid, that the girl that's pregnant at 17 with the 19-year-old boyfriend, and they really want to be together. We don't support them and make it possible for them to have a family and to raise that kid with some degree of dignity. We need to start doing that. We need to start supporting the young parents. Yeah, and making sure that the young men have gainful employment, that they can support a wife and a child. And this is for America. This will make us a better nation. It will solve some of our problems. I will not rantle on. I will just see if there's another question you want me to address. I do think about it in ways that, especially if you look at the old hoofers, the younger tap dancers have said something very similar. They've said, if I hadn't found this art form, I might be on the street selling crack, or I might be on the street, doing whatever that's unsavory. So we have not used our cultural birthright, because these dances that our people have done for centuries, these gestures and postures that we organize rhythmically that become known as dance, we have not used the great potential of this thing to tap into our young people. They are so tuned in to music and dance and culture that with the right funding and the right leadership, we really can help our young people using the culture that's native to their own communities.
So, I call you Dr. Katrina. Dr. Katrina, when you said we have not recognized or infused our birthright, what exactly do you mean by birthright? What is our birthright?
Well, there are these. What got me to thinking about this was the whole notion of what this whole concept of birthright is. That there is a legacy that you are born into that is yours simply because of who you are born as. And the music and the dance of our ancestors, the music and the dance that we have both inherited and created, is our birthright. And we don't think of it or talk about it as a birthright. It's been taken and used and it's made lots of people lots of money. And it was only with the hip-hop and the rappers that once they came along, they started controlling their own distribution and controlling their own record sales and controlling their own contracts in ways that recording artists had not previously. Some of it has to do with education. Many of the artists were not literate, or they were semi-literate, and they got ripped off. Read the biography of Little Richard, and read what happened to James Brown, and read what happened to many of our dancers and musicians. But the guys that do hip-hop, they changed some of that, so they began controlling the music. But they have seized on the legacy of their own birthright, and they're benefiting from it, and they're profiting from it. Up until fairly recently, and when I say fairly recently, I mean 30 to 40 years, other people controlled our music. Outsiders got very wealthy. Oftentimes, artists would sign away the rights, couldn't have control of their own masters, and just literally lose basically all their profit. And and the manager would buy them a little trinket of a car or something, and we know the story. And so we have to control this thing that's ours. We have to be the primary beneficiaries of our own cultural products. And we are born with this legacy. We develop this legacy. It's in our blood. It's in our ancestral legacy. Our parents passed. You said your uncle, you couldn't, sleep without learning how to filly bop. They pushed the couch back and demanded of you. Well, I had a similar experience, learning how to, what we called hand dance in the 50s, would be called filly bopping. When I was a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, my uncle would come over, my grandmother's baby brother, who had been a dancer, he'd grab my mother, and they would start doing it in the living room. He'd swing her out and grab me. And as a kid, I didn't know what to do, but he would still grab me and introducing me to this legacy of dance. And that's a common experience in black households, especially black working class core culture households, where people practice the southern-based cultural traditions. Yeah.
So, what is the linkage, or is there a linkage between mental health and the ability to express your own culture?
Yeah, that's a hell of a question. I would say a big yes to that. We know, even as lay people, even as people who have not studied psychology or psychiatry, we know that it's good to never repress your anxieties. We've heard that it can cause all kinds of health problems. It can cause, hypertension. And I'm convinced that that's one of the problems in our community. The hypertension, I think, has very little to do with people eating too many ham sandwiches, because we don't eat that many ham sandwiches. I think it has to do with the kind of subtle, everyday microaggressions that people feel and that people are sensitized to and have to withstand. And then having to kind of worry about, am I going to be able to get this done? I really don't want to do it in the system, but I guess I got to do it this way because I got to get it done. And, all of that. And then the basic requirements of paying rent and buying food and, going and getting your driver's license and, and you have to do all of that under the pressure of, I might not be able to get it done.
So do you think that nutrition has a lot to do with the criminality and the level of violence in our communities?
Listen, I not only think that nutrition has something to do with it, I think that there may be also some other things as well, like they're called these things that are now in the water. These they're not nutrients, but they're endocrine disruptors. And they're these micro particles that can actually get through the filters. So these endocrine disruptors are causing all kinds of havoc among lower forms of animals, aquatic animals like fish, being born with 2 sets of genitals, male and female, when the fish didn't normally do that, or frogs being born with 6 legs and 2 sets of genitals. And, we're at the top of the food chain. And if you're in an area in which there's poison being dumped, or you're in a community that's built over a toxic waste dump, who's to say that some of the endocrine disruptors or these micropollutants that are in the water supply, along with, and when we say nutrition, we're not only talking about having enough in terms of bulk to eat, but food that is healthy, that's not genetically modified, that doesn't have all kinds of hormone treatments or whatever people are doing to the food now. But good, basic, nutrient-dense, healthy food grown right out of the earth organically. So you combine all of those factors, the pollution that's in the environment, probably there are some people that are more sensitive to all of that than other people are. Some people have allergies and some people don't. I would not discount any of those possibilities. I think about this high fructose corn syrup that's in everything. Yesterday I had a Coca-Cola for the first time in probably several years. And I noticed that the Coca-Cola had cane sugar in it, old-fashioned cane sugar, and not high fructose corn syrup. And I thought, well, now, we used to think that this cane sugar was so awful until we got this real poison, you know. So,
And that comes from Mexico.
yeah,
That Coke comes from Mexico.
that's right, it's Mexican
It's
Coke.
not. Yeah, it's not from the Coca-Cola company in America, but the Coca-Cola bottle in Mexico. They don't use sugar.
Yeah,
Because
they
sugar
use
is poisonous. Sugar is actually a poison.
Yeah, yeah. They use the actual cane juice and evaporate it, and that's what you, yeah. That's what used to be in, all the sugar that I grew up with was cane sugar. And Alaga syrup used to be real cane syrup. Where do you get real cane syrup anymore? So, as a child, all the food was organic. There wasn't a lot of poison in the early 50s like we got later on. I guess late 50s, early 60s, you get this so-called green revolution, you know, financed by Rockefeller and Ford. And it emphasized, I guess, 4 major crops that were supposed to feed the world. And of course, we see how that turned out. Large numbers of fertilizers being used and all kinds of issues appearing for the first time. Like the creation of dead zones. I just think that, what can we eat? You know, I got some wild-caught salmon not too long ago when I was pregnant. The doctor said, well, don't eat this stuff more than twice a week. Well, what do you mean don't eat it more than twice a week? Why not? Well, the mercury content might be bad for the fetus if you do it more than twice. Why aren't you telling the public? Why are you only just whispering it in the ears of pregnant women? So I throw my hands up. What can I eat? You can't, if you eat meat, you worry about the beef. If you got to find somebody that's got organic, because they're filling them full of hormones, and then the food may be treated with who knows what. So what you gonna do? Become an aeritarian? Can't become an aeritarian because the air is jacked up. But I think, to answer your question, with the humorous side, I think that all of the factors that are been laid on the table here, diet, environmental pollutants, all are contributing factors. You know, some people respond differently. Some people get rashes as a result of, and other people don't get them. Some people, like I've been having hay fever because of the pollen in the new, you know, the spring buds. Other people don't get it. So I'm not surprised that the amount of poison would definitely could push a person over the edge. Yeah.
Okay, I have probably one more question. If you were a rich woman and you had all the money in the world,
Boy, oh boy.
what kind of program would you implement to help our community grow
boy.
out of the violence?
Boy, oh boy.
Those young people shooting each other and destroying families for generations to come.
Well, one thing, if I could, would be to create a work structure that would immediately give all those men who want to work an adequate and gainful wage. That would be the first thing I would do. Because a lot of the negativity in our community has resulted from the disorganization that came with deindustrialization. Once deindustrialization hit us and all of those jobs left the country, what were our men supposed to do? Especially in the face of a growing women's movement demanding equality, as we are getting fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer male jobs or jobs in factories. So where are you going to go with that? You know, so that would be the first thing I would do, would be to make sure that people could get employment that would be gainful, that would give them good quality health insurance and dental insurance. That would be the first thing. Second thing I would do would be to make sure that everybody had adequate, not luxurious, but adequate housing. Get rid of this homelessness. Adequate housing. Then I would try to figure out a way to make sure that everybody had a minimum adequate diet.
Mm-hmm.
Once that's done, then now we can start to solve some problems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can start working on education and some other things that we would need. But I would definitely get people employed in some sort of gainful profession that they might even want. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, we ought to just let all of those young men who want to, who got convicted and locked up for cannabis, for marijuana, to get them and just train them how to run a dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
They're smart enough to do it because they did it on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And just let them be committed to giving a certain number of them that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That was just, you know, I thought this in the back of my mind, because who else is better suited to do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but
Yeah.
that'd be too much like right, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would make sure that everybody was employed who wanted a adequate paying job.
I think that's a good
Or
idea.
whether that meant, you know, stepping into a service that you provide to your own business,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like your own, whatever it is, but some form of gainful work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that would. I also think that would solve a plethora
That would immediately
of problems.
cut the crime rate by probably 70%.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. It would take a while, like, you know, a number of years, but you could achieve a change in under 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
You have to start somewhere.
There are things that we could do, but we need more people to mobilize. For example, if I had 12 people, 6 couples, I could take those 6 couples, that's 12 people. You know, Jesus had 12 disciples, allegedly 12 disciples. So if I had 12 people, 6 couples, we could sit down and draw up a plan for the black community of any particular city, let's say Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I would find the 6 most powerful black churches, and I would disperse one couple into each one of those 6 churches.
Mm-hmm.
With a plan that we've all agreed upon. For example, the first thing might be you all are all going to join the church.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The church don't know that we got this little group that we planning and plotting. The second thing you might do would be everybody gets, one of you, at least one of the couple, you got to get on the deacon board.
Mm-hmm.
So now we got 6 people on the deacon boards of the 6 most powerful churches in Philadelphia. There's almost no black person in Philadelphia that doesn't have a church connection.
Mm-hmm.
Either their grandmama got a good church-going friend, but they got some kind of line into a church.
Mm-hmm.
And so we might say, well, let's start it. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to start a tutoring program in the basement of all 6 of these schools. We're going to do a math tutoring program. And inside of 5 years, we're going to raise the SAT scores of all the kids that participate in these programs. That might be a simple goal for us. And we're going to raise the SAT scores, and our goal is to get 1,000 more of them into a historically black college with scholarship money, you know what I mean? But concerted effort wouldn't take a whole lot of people. But if you had 12 committed people, you could move a city in a way that would be noticeable, that you could see the outcomes inside of 5 years. And it wouldn't take a whole lot of money, but it would just take the commitment. We're going to stick through this for 5 years. We're going to come up with a plan. And like I said, maybe something as simple as doing a math tutoring program. The other thing is, we have to use those young people who otherwise would be out there shooting each other. For example, one of the things I suggested to Rutgers was, if you're concerned about who's walking through the campus, go up the street and you know who the thugs are in the community. Get one of the thugs and hire him. Train him and hire him. He'll cool all the rest of them out. We got to pull these young people in and give them a certain level of acceptance and support. Who better to know who the other thugs are than one who's in the ring himself? Pull him in. If he don't work out, get another one. But don't give up on him. You know, there are things we could do. I think one of the problems we're having now is this lack of leadership. And you know, that was point number one in the COINTELPRO. I keep saying that. Point number one in the COINTELPRO was to make sure that no adequate leadership develops in the black community. You know, because if they can keep that from developing, you know, then hey, we can just remain scattered to the wind. But you know, we gotta, but let another Martin Luther King, and I think we got one on the scene. I think this guy in North Carolina, what's his name? The one that's been doing the Moral Monday. Bishop, they call him. He's been doing these Moral Mondays, and it's been very successful. And they just recently started putting pressure on the governor of Tennessee, and he expanded Medicaid to include 700,000 more people who didn't have Medicaid now have it. Okay? You know, basic. So his movement is really, he's revived Martin Luther King's Poor People campaign. And they rocking and rolling. So, I mean, they rocking and rolling so much it makes me want to move to North Carolina to see if I can't just like get out there on the picket line with them. Because every time I see them on YouTube, I get real excited. But yeah, so there is a mass movement going on, but there's a news blackout, you know. That was one of the things that came out of COINTELPRO. Make sure you get the news blackout. Don't cover it on the news and won't nobody know what's happening. You know. So yeah.
So, okay, so we're gonna try to end this session.
Okay.
And but I know you're an artist. Do you have any poem or saying or something that you would?
Well, you know, recently I've been working on a piece on dance and labor. And I've been thinking about this a lot, on how, as our labor profile has changed from us being agricultural workers to being factory workers to now becoming service workers or unemployed or working in the underground economy, how those economic changes and how that repositioning, how that impacts upon the way we create dance and music. And so I've just been thinking about how we can actually see the transformations in the dances themselves. You know, and so I've been kind of working on a piece on that and trying to think it through. You know, but in terms of just little phrases or sayings, no, I don't really have any at this time.
How about your telephone call?
Oh,
thing?
yeah. There's my friend Plathel Benjamin, who used to live here in Philadelphia and do a radio show and was one of Queen Mother Moore's godsons. He listened to my old answering message, and he said that it sounded like I was being held hostage. So he said, you know, you can do better than that. So I went back and dug up an old, I am the queen, I'm off the scene, so leave a message on my machine. Speak it real clear, come out that slumber. Leave your name and your phone number, then chill out, Jack. A rap attack, you'll hear from me when I get back.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Katrina.
Maybe I'll come up with a second verse.
Oh, you have a second voice?
I don't know. I'll have to come up with one.
Oh.
I think I'll make up one. I exhausted my rap skills with that one verse.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And Katrina is also our cultural consultant for this entire project, so you'll probably be hearing from her again. And that's it. We'll finish taping with Dr. Katrina.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Yep, I've jumped on the L.
Oh, good.
I just took the